I've spent 1,825 days funding a ghost. Every single week, I handed over a $300 envelope to my in-laws, money taken directly from my daughter's future, all to pay off a debt my husband left behind when he supposedly died in that North Dakota explosion. I believed I was honoring a martyr. But this morning, the lies didn't just crack, they shattered. A private investigator didn't find my husband's grave. He found a social media post of a man with my husband's unique crescent-shaped scar, laughing in the driveway of $1 million New Jersey estate. He didn't die for our family. He traded us for a clean slate. My mourning is officially over. I'm about to turn their retirement into a prison sentence. If you think you know how deep betrayal goes, you haven't seen anything yet. Most people will watch this story, feel something for 30 seconds, then scroll past and forget I ever existed. That's fine. Some people are comfortable staying in the dark. But if you're the kind of person who actually wants to see how this ends, who needs to know whether justice gets served or whether evil wins again, then maybe you should subscribe. Because when the next chapter drops and you're not here, you'll be the one wondering what you missed while everyone else already knows the truth. Now, before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? I want to know who's standing with me on this. I'm standing in a cemetery in rural Connecticut, holding an urn that was supposed to contain my husband's ashes. My hands are shaking so hard I can barely grip the ceramic. The seal just cracked open, and what I'm staring at isn't bone fragments or cremated remains. It's sand, industrial sand, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $15 a bag. And at the bottom, 3 fishing sinkers, just heavy enough to make the urn feel legitimate when you shake it. 4 or 5 years, I've been praying over construction debris. 4 or 5 years, I've walked 3 miles to work in snow that bled through my shoes, scraping together $300 every single Friday to pay off a dead man's debt to his parents. I've fed my daughter canned soup while his family cashed my envelopes and called me dutiful. But Kasim isn't dead, and the people I've been sacrificing everything for, they've been laughing at me the entire time. My mourning is over. What comes next is war. Let me take you back to where this nightmare started, or at least where I thought it was just my life. Bridgeport, Connecticut, February. The kind of cold that doesn't just freeze your skin, it climbs inside your bones and sets up camp. I lived in a 4th floor walk-up where the heat came on for maybe 3 hours a day, and even then, it hissed like it resented the effort. The building smelled like mildew, old cooking oil, and the kind of exhaustion you can't wash off. My daughter, Amira, slept in the only bedroom. She's 5. I took the couch. Every morning, I woke up at 4:30 a.m. to a budget notebook that sat on the kitchen counter like a judge's gavel. That notebook ruled my life. Every single dollar was accounted for. Rent, $850. Utilities, $120. Groceries, $180 if I was lucky. Amira's daycare, $200. And then, every Friday, the line that made my stomach twist into knots. Sterling debt payment, $300. $300. Every week. 52 weeks a year. For 5 years. Do the math. That's $78,000 I've handed over to my in-laws. Money that could have been Amira's college fund. Money that could have been a reliable car, so I didn't have to walk 40 minutes to my housekeeping job and whether that turned my fingers blue. Money that could have been a winter coat that actually fit my daughter instead of the hand-me-down one with a broken zipper she wore until the lining fell apart. But I paid it every single week because I believe it was the right thing to do. Let me tell you about the walk. Every Friday evening after my shift ended, I walked from the east side of Bridgeport to the Sterling's house on the west end. 43 minutes if I didn't stop. The route took me past the shuttered factories, the corner stores with bars on the windows, the bus stop where the bench was always wet no matter the weather. The Sterlings lived in a brick house with black shutters and a driveway that was always freshly shoveled, even when the rest of the block looked like an avalanche hit it. The house looked respectable, modest, the kind of place where you'd think two elderly people were barely scraping by. I'd stand on the porch, holding that white envelope in my freezing hands, and knock 3 times. And every single time, Mrs. Sterling would open the door just wide enough to fit her bony hand through. The chain lock stayed on. Always. "Is that this week's payment?" she'd ask. Not "Hello, Zoya." Not "How's Amira?" Just the money. "Yes, ma'am." 300 like always. She'd snatch the envelope, glance inside without counting it, because she knew I'd never short her, and then her eyes would flick behind me to the street like she was checking to see if anyone was watching. "Your father-in-law isn't feeling well today. His back is acting up again." That was her excuse. Every time. For 5 years, I've been told he was too sick for visitors, too tired, too weak. But not too weak to cash my checks. One time, just once, I brought Amira with me. She was 4 then, wearing a pink jacket I'd bought at a thrift store. She held my hand and looked up at the door with her big brown eyes, excited to meet her grandparents. Mrs. Sterling cracked the door open and froze when she saw Amira. "Why did you bring the child? I thought you'd want to see her. She's your granddaughter." Mrs. Sterling's face didn't soften. It hardened. "The house is too dusty. She'll get sick. Don't bring her again." She took the envelope and shut the door. Amira looked up at me, confused. "Don't they like me, Mama?" I knelt down and hugged her so she wouldn't see the tears in my eyes. "They're just old and tired, baby. It's not about you." But it was starting to feel like it was about something. Let me rewind to the day this all started. The day I became a widow. 5 years ago, Kasim left for North Dakota. He got a job at a chemical processing plant. The pay was good, better than anything in Connecticut, and we needed the money. Amira was just a baby, and I was drowning in hospital bills for her delivery. Kasim kissed me goodbye at the bus station. "I'll send money home every week. We're going to be okay, Zoya. I promise." 3 months later, I got the call. A man named Mr. Grayson from the plant's safety office told me there had been an explosion. A tank ruptured. Kasim and 2 other workers didn't make it. The bodies were too damaged to transport, so they'd been cremated on-site per company protocol. They shipped me an urn, a plain ceramic jar with Kasim's name printed on a brass plate. I didn't even get to see him one last time. The Sterlings showed up at my apartment the day after the funeral. Mrs. Sterling was wearing all black, her face pale and tight. She sat across from me at my tiny kitchen table and said the words that would haunt me for 5 years. Kasim borrowed our entire retirement savings to take that job, $18,000. We gave it to him because we believed in him. Now he's gone, and we have nothing. We're too old to work. We have no one else. You're his wife. You have to make this right." I was drowning in grief. I couldn't think straight. I nodded, and just like that, I became their ATM. But lately, cracks were starting to show. 2 weeks ago, I stopped by the corner grocery store to pick up bread. The owner, Mr. Tavares, an older Portuguese man who'd known the Sterlings for decades, was outside smoking a cigarette. "Hey, Zoya, you still doing okay?" "Getting by, Mr. Tavares." "You?" He nodded, then squinted at me. "You know, I saw your in-laws the other day. They just bought themselves a brand new car. A silver sedan. Real nice. I didn't know they had that kind of money." My stomach dropped. A new car. Yeah, paid in cash for what I heard. I forced a smile and walked away, my mind racing. If they could afford a new car, why were they still taking $300 a week from me? That same Friday, when I went to drop off the envelope, I noticed something. Mrs. Sterling opened the door, took the money, and stepped back. But as she moved, something fell from the hallway table behind her. A leather glove. Men's. Brand new. The kind with soft lambskin lining that costs $60, maybe $70. Ma'am, you dropped. She slammed the door before I could finish. I stood there, staring at the peeling paint on the door frame, my heart pounding. Who was that glove for? The next day, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. No stamp. Just my name written in block letters. Inside was a single photograph. Blurry. Grainy. Zoomed in on a man's ankle. And on that ankle was a crescent-shaped scar. The same scar Kasim got when he was 12, falling off a dirt bike. I dropped the photo like it was on fire. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table under the flickering overhead light, staring at that photograph until my eyes burned. I pulled out an old magnifying glass I used for reading fine print on bills and examined every pixel. The scar was unmistakable. A crescent moon, about an inch long, just above the ankle bone. Kasim used to joke that it looked like someone had tried to bite him. But Kasim was dead. I'd been to his memorial. I'd held his urn. I'd cried over his grave marker at the family plot in the country. So who was in this photo? I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Lots of people have scars. Maybe this was someone else. Maybe someone was playing a cruel prank. But the more I looked, the more details jumped out. The angle of the foot, the way the person was standing, weight shifted slightly to the right like Kasim always did because of an old knee injury. And then I saw it. In the background of the photo, barely visible, was the edge of a black SUV. Expensive. Clean. The kind of car I'd never be able to afford. My hand started shaking. The next morning, I was carrying a bag of trash down to the dumpster when I ran into Mr. Henderson, my neighbor from the third floor. He was a retired postal worker, 72 years old, with sharp eyes and a habit of noticing everything. "Morning, Zoya." "Morning, Mr. Henderson." He hesitated, like he was deciding whether or not to say something. Then he leaned in close. "Can I ask you something? I don't mean to pry, but are your in-laws doing okay?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I've been seeing something strange. Late at night, around 2, 3 in the morning, I let my dog out, and I keep seeing a black SUV parked behind their house. A man gets out. He doesn't knock. He uses a key and just walks in. My blood went cold. A man, yeah, tall, moves kind of stiff, like he's got a bad leg or something. And Zoya, the way he walks, it reminds me of Kasim. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. That's impossible. Kasim is dead." Mr. Henderson looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. I know what I saw. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. Why would someone be sneaking into the Sterling's house in the middle of the night? Why did that person walk like Kasim? And why was I still paying them $300 a week if they clearly didn't need it? I decided to test them. That Friday, when I went to drop off the envelope, I did something I'd never done before. I asked for help. Mrs. Sterling opened the door, hand outstretched. "Ma'am, before you take this, I need to ask you something." Her eyes narrowed. "What?" "Amira needs new shoes. The ones she has are falling apart. I was wondering if maybe just this once, I could pay you $250 instead of $300 and use the $50 for her shoes." The reaction was instant. Mrs. Sterling's face twisted with rage. "Are you serious right now? You want to short us? After everything we've lost? After everything your husband put us through? I'm not trying to. We're starving, Zoya. We can barely afford our medication. And you want to take food out of our mouths so your daughter can have fancy shoes. They're not fancy. They're just 300 every week. That was the deal. If you can't honor your husband's debt, then maybe you never loved him at all. She ripped the envelope out of my hand and slammed the door. I stood there stunned. That wasn't grief. That was greed. On my way home, I walked past their trash cans. They were sitting on the curb, waiting for pickup. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Right on top was a receipt from a high-end grocery store across town. The kind of place that sells organic produce and imported cheeses. The total, $287. The items, grass-fed ribeye steaks, aged cheddar, fresh crab legs, a bottle of wine that cost $42. People who are starving don't buy crab legs. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the receipt. Then I kept walking. 3 blocks from my apartment, I noticed something. A black SUV with tinted windows was following me. It stayed about half a block behind, moving when I moved, stopping when I stopped. My heart started pounding. I turned down a side street. The SUV turned too. I broke into a jog. So did the SUV. Finally, I ducked into a corner store, breathing hard. I watched through the window as the SUV slowed, paused, and drove off. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and called the one person I knew could help me. My brother, Cyrus. He answered on the second ring. Zoya? You okay? Cyrus. My voice cracked. I think I'm praying at an empty grave. Cyrus arrived the next morning. He drove up from Maryland in his beat-up Honda, carrying a laptop bag and a duffel full of equipment I didn't recognize. Cyrus worked in digital security, something to do with tracking data breaches and financial fraud. I didn't fully understand it, but I knew he was good at finding things people didn't want found. We sat at my kitchen table, the photograph spread out between us. Walk me through everything, he said, his voice calm and methodical. Start from the beginning. I told him about the payments, the Sterling's cold behavior, the new car, the expensive groceries, the man Mr. Henderson saw, the SUV that followed me. Cyrus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. Zoya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you think Kasim is alive? The words hung in the air like smoke. I don't know. I want to say no, but the scar, Cyrus, that photo, let me see it. I handed it to him. He pulled out a small magnifying lens and examined it for a long time. This is recent, he said finally. The quality, the angle. This was taken with a smartphone in the last few months. And you're right, that scar is distinctive. So what do we do? Cyrus opened his laptop. We follow the money. He started typing, his fingers moving fast across the keyboard. Every person leaves a digital footprint. Bank accounts, IP addresses, social media. Even if Kasim faked his death, he can't erase everything. People get sloppy. They log in from the wrong device. They make a purchase. They use a name that's just different enough to avoid detection, but not different enough to be invisible. Can you find him? I can try. But first, I need access to the Sterling's financial records. Do you have any account numbers? Anything they've given you? I shook my head. They've never shown me anything. They just take the cash. Okay, then we go a different route. You said Kasim's death certificate came from North Dakota, right? Yeah, from the chemical plant. Cyrus pulled up a database on his screen. What was the name of the company? Frontier Processing, I think. He typed it in. A few seconds later, his expression darkened. Zoya, Frontier Processing doesn't exist. What? It's a shell corporation, registered to a P.O. box in Wyoming. No employees, no physical address. It was created 6 months before Kasim died, and it was dissolved 2 months after. My stomach dropped. So the whole thing was fake? It looks that way. But here's the thing. Someone went through a lot of trouble to make it look real. That takes money. Connections. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment plan. He kept typing. I watched the screen, not understanding half of what I was seeing, but trusting Cyrus completely. Then he stopped. Got something. What? He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a bank account summary. The account holder was listed as K. Sterling. This is a private account. It's been receiving deposits of $300 every Friday for the last 5 years. My $300. But look at this. He scrolled down. There are also wire transfers. Big ones. Coming from construction firm in New Jersey. 10,000 here. 15,000 there. Someone is funneling a lot of money into this account. Who? I don't know yet. But I can tell you where the account is being accessed from. He clicked a few more times, pulling up a map with a red pin. Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I stared at the screen. That's not North Dakota. No, it's not. Most people watch these stories and think that could never be me, while their own circle is plotting against them. Subscribe now, so you're the one who sees the warning signs before it's too late. Don't be the victim who never saw it coming. Cyrus kept digging. An hour later, he found something else. Zoya, look at this. He pulled up a streaming service account. Netflix. The account was linked to the same K. Sterling profile. So look at what's being watched. Action movies, sports documentaries, stand-up comedy specials. I frowned. The Sterlings don't watch that stuff. Mrs. Sterling only watches those church programs, and Mr. Sterling falls asleep by 8. Exactly. Someone else is using this account, and they're logging in from Cherry Hill. My hands clenched into fists. It's him. It has to be. Cyrus nodded slowly. There's one more thing. He pulled up a website for a private contracting firm in New Jersey. On Our Team page, there was a photo of a crew standing in front of a construction site. And there, in the back row, partially hidden behind another worker, was a man in a hard hat and sunglasses. But I could see enough. The build, the posture, the way he stood. That's Kasim, I whispered. Cyrus zoomed in. I can't confirm it's him from this photo alone, but I can confirm the GPS coordinates of where this company operates. He pulled up a satellite image of a suburban neighborhood in Cherry Hill. A nice neighborhood, tree-lined streets, big houses with 2-car garages. He zoomed in on one house in particular. This is the address where the IP logins are coming from. I stared at the house. It was beautiful. A 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and a manicured lawn. While I was eating canned soup in a freezing apartment, someone was living there. I need to see it, I said. Zoya, I need to see it with my own eyes. Cyrus hesitated. Then he nodded. Okay, but we do this smart. No confrontations. We watch. We record. We gather evidence. And then we go to the authorities. Fine. I'm serious, Zoya. If Kasim is alive and he faked his death, this is federal. Insurance fraud. Identity theft. Maybe worse. We can't tip him off. I understand. But inside, I was already planning what I'd say when I saw him. Before I could confront the living, I had to face the dead. Or at least what I thought was dead. The cemetery was 2 hours outside Bridgeport, in a small town where Kasim's family had roots going back generations. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and the loudest sound was the wind moving through the trees. I'd only been there once, the day we interred the urn. I told Cyrus I was going alone. Are you sure? He asked. I need to do this myself. He didn't argue. He just handed me a small camera. If you find anything, document it. We'll need proof. The drive was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want distractions. I just needed to think. What if I was wrong? What if the photo was a mistake and I was about to desecrate my husband's grave over paranoia? But then I thought about the SUV, the expensive groceries, the Shell Corporation, the New Jersey house. No, I wasn't wrong. The cemetery was surrounded by a low stone wall, the kind that had been there for 100 years. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. The graves were old, weathered headstones with names worn smooth by time. The Sterling family plot was near the back, under a massive oak tree. And there, in a stone niche built into a small mausoleum wall, was Kasim's urn. I stood in front of it, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack a rib. The brass plate was polished, clean. Someone had been taking care of it. I pulled out the tools I brought, a screwdriver, a small crowbar, a pair of gloves. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped the screwdriver twice. "Forgive me," I whispered. I wasn't sure if I was talking to God or to Kasim. Maybe both. The niche was sealed with mortar. I worked slowly, carefully, chipping away at the edges. It took 20 minutes before I could pry the door open. The urn was heavier than I remembered. I lifted it out and set it on the ground. The seal around the lid was tight. I had to use the crowbar to break it. And then I lifted the lid. Inside was sand. Not ash. Sand. The kind you buy in bulk at a landscaping supply store. And at the bottom, 3 fishing sinkers. Lead weights. I stared at it for a long time, my mind completely blank. Then I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I was going to scream. I'd been praying over sand. I'd been crying over hardware store supplies. I've been paying for a man who was eating crab legs in New Jersey. I pulled out the camera and started recording. My name is Zoya Hale. Today is March 7th. I'm at the Sterling family cemetery plot, and I've just opened the urn that was supposed to contain my husband's remains. I tilted the camera toward the urn. This is what's inside: industrial sand and fishing weights. My voice was steady, cold. I reached into the urn and pulled out a small piece of paper I hadn't noticed before. It was folded, yellowed. I unfolded it carefully. It was a printed certificate. Official cremation documentation, Frontier Processing, North Dakota. But the print quality was terrible. Blurry. The kind of thing you'd make on a home printer. And at the bottom, in tiny letters, was a typo. Preemption. They couldn't even spell cremation correctly. I held the paper up to the camera. This is the official document. It's fake. All of it. I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. An old man in a groundskeeper's uniform was standing there, holding a rake, staring at me with wide eyes. "Ma'am, what are you doing?" I stood up slowly, still holding the urn. "I'm taking back what's mine." He looked at the urn, then at me. That's desecration of... "It's sand," I said, my voice hard. "It's sand and lies. And the people who put it here are going to pay for every grain." I set the urn back in a niche, sealed it, and walked away. As I reached the gate, I stopped and looked back at the plot one last time. "The woman who paid you died today," I said quietly. "Now, you deal with me." 3 days later, Cyrus and I were sitting in a rental car on a tree-lined street in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The contrast was so sharp it felt like we'd driven into a different country. Bridgeport was all cracked pavement and chain-link fences. Graffiti on the bus stops. Boarded-up storefronts with hand-painted signs that hadn't been updated since the 90s. The kind of place where you kept your head down and your hand on your purse. Cherry Hill was something else entirely. The streets were smooth, clean. The sidewalks had brick inlays. Every house had a lawn that looked like it had been cut with scissors. There were Japanese maples in the front yards, decorative mailboxes, SUVs in the driveways that still had that dealership shine. This was the kind of neighborhood where people jogged at 6 in the morning with expensive headphones and yoga mats, where the coffee shop sold lattes for $7 and no one blinked. And somewhere in this postcard-perfect suburban dream, my husband was hiding. Cyrus had parked us half a block down from the address he'd tracked. We had a clear view of the house. It was beautiful, a two-story colonial painted soft gray with white trim, a wraparound porch with hanging ferns, a two-car garage. The lawn was so green it almost looked fake. There was a swing set in the backyard. I felt something crack inside my chest. "You okay?" Cyrus asked quietly. I nodded, even though I wasn't. "We wait," he said. "We watch. We don't engage." I know. We sat in silence for 20 minutes. Cyrus had brought a thermos of coffee. I couldn't drink it. My stomach felt like it was full of broken glass. Then, at exactly 4:47 p.m., a black SUV turned onto the street. My entire body went rigid. The SUV pulled into the driveway. The engine cut off. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped Mrs. Sterling. But she didn't look like the woman who'd been slamming doors in my face for 5 years. She was wearing a tailored coat, expensive boots. Her hair was freshly dyed and styled. She was carrying shopping bag from stores I'd never be able to afford. Nordstrom, Williams-Sonoma, a boutique I didn't recognize. The passenger door opened. Mr. Sterling stepped out. He wasn't hunched over. He wasn't limping. He didn't look like a man whose back was too weak to see his granddaughter. He looked healthy, strong. He was laughing at something his wife said. Then the front door of the house opened, and a man walked out. Tall, broad shoulders, a trimmed beard. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, the sleeves rolled up. I couldn't breathe. It was Kasim. He walked down the porch steps, smiling, and pulled his mother into a hug. She kissed his cheek. His father clapped him on the shoulder. They looked like a happy family. My hand was shaking so hard I had to grip the door handle to keep them still. "Zoya," Cyrus said softly, "I need you to stay calm." I couldn't respond. My vision was tunneling. All I could see was him, the man I'd mourned, the man I cried over, the man whose fake grave I'd prayed at while my daughter asked why Daddy wasn't coming home. He was laughing. Mrs. Sterling handed him one of the shopping bags. He pulled out a bottle of wine and held it up to the light, nodding in approval. Wine that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Then I noticed something else. The garage door was open. Inside, next to the black SUV, was a silver sedan. Brand new. The same car Mr. Tavares had seen the Sterlings buying in Bridgeport. They weren't visiting. They lived here. The Bridgeport house. The one with the peeling paint and the dusty rooms and the chain lock on the door. That was just a prop. A set piece. A place to collect my money and play the role of grieving, struggling parents. This was their real life. You're halfway through a story that most people will forget by tomorrow because they weren't paying attention. If you're the kind of person who misses the details, don't be surprised when you're the last one to know the truth. Cyrus pulled out a camera with a long lens and started taking photos. The shutter clicked softly over and over. I pulled out a pair of binoculars. Kasim walked back toward the house, carrying the wine and a grocery bag. His mother followed him, still talking, gesturing with her hands. Then Kasim stopped. He turned and looked directly at our car. My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought he'd seen us. But the windows were tinted, and we were far enough away that we should have been invisible. He stood there for a few seconds, scanning the street. Then he shrugged and walked inside. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "We need to get closer," I said. "Zoya." I need to hear what they're saying. Cyrus hesitated. Then he reached into the back seat and pulled out a black case. Inside was a parabolic microphone, the kind you see in spy movies. This picks up sound from a distance, but we have to be careful. If they see us, they won't. We waited until the sun started to set. The Sterlings and Kasim moved to the back patio. I could see them through the fence, sitting around a glass table, drinking wine, laughing. Cyrus aimed the microphone, and then I heard it. Kasim's voice, clear as day. So, she actually believed you needed the 300 for medicine? Mrs. Sterling's laugh was sharp and cruel. She believes everything we tell her. I could ask for 500 next month, and she'd find a way. Don't push it, Ma. We need her compliant, not suspicious. Oh, please. That girl is too busy playing martyr to ask questions. She actually brought the child once, thinking we'd want to see her. Kasim snorted. What did you do? Sent her away, of course. The last thing we need is that kid bonding with us and asking questions later. I felt bile rising in my throat. Besides, Mrs. Sterling continued, the 300 a week keeps her distracted. If she thinks she's honoring you, she won't go looking for the settlement money. 2 million, Kasim said, his voice smug. Sitting offshore, completely untouchable. The insurance company bought the whole thing. Fake death certificate, fake cremation, fake everything. And Zoya's weekly payments make it look even more legitimate. Why would a grieving widow be paying off debts if her husband was alive? My hands clenched into fists. You're a genius, son, Mr. Sterling said. A cold-blooded genius. I learned from the best pop. They clinked glasses. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run across that perfect lawn and shatter every tooth in Kasim's smiling mouth. But Cyrus grabbed my arm. Not yet. We need everything on record. The conversation continued. Mrs. Sterling leaned back in her chair. How's your wife handling things? I froze. Wife. Kasim grinned. Diane? She's fine. She thinks you two are just my retired parents visiting from out of state. She has no idea about Bridgeport. No idea about Zoya. As far as she knows, I'm a clean slate. A new wife. He had a new wife. While I was scraping together change to buy my daughter shoes, he was building a whole new life. With a new family. A new identity. And I was just a ghost he'd left behind. A police cruiser turned onto the street, moving slowly. Get down, Cyrus hissed. We both ducked. The cruiser passed without stopping, but my heart was hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. When I sat back up, I looked through the binoculars just in time to see something that made my blood turn to ice. Kasim reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick stack of cash. He counted out several bills and handed them to his mother. She took them, smiling, and tucked them into her purse. I recognized those bills. They were the exact ones I'd handed Mrs. Sterling 2 days ago in Bridgeport. I'd gotten them from the bank in a specific sequence. 5 20s, 10 10s, 2 50s. The same stack. The same money. My money. Going from my hand to hers, to his, and back again in an endless, cruel loop. Mrs. Sterling stood up, stretching. We should increase it to 400 next month. She's been too comfortable. Let's squeeze a little harder. Kasim laughed. You're ruthless, Ma. I learned from you, darling. They clinked glasses again. I turned off the binoculars. I looked at Cyrus. We're going to the FBI, I said. Agreed. And we're bringing all of this with us. He nodded. Every word, every photo, every receipt. I looked back at the house one last time. Kasim was standing now, walking toward the edge of the patio, phone to his ear. He was smiling, but not for long. We stayed for another hour, recording everything. Cyrus had positioned the microphone perfectly. Every word they said was captured in crystal clear audio. And what I heard in that hour destroyed any remaining piece of love I'd ever felt for Kasim. He wasn't just a liar. He was a predator. Mrs. Sterling refilled her wine glass and leaned back in her chair. You know, I almost feel bad for her. Don't, Kasim said flatly. She made her choice. She could have walked away years ago. But she didn't, because you knew she wouldn't. Kasim shrugged. I knew exactly what kind of woman I married. Religious, loyal to a fault. The kind who'd sacrifice herself for family honor. It's pathetic, but it's useful. I dug my nails into my palms so hard I drew blood. Mr. Sterling chuckled. You always were a planner. Even as a kid. I had to be. When I got into trouble in North Dakota, when I owed those guys 60 grand from the poker games, I didn't have a choice. Either I disappeared or they killed me. So I disappeared and made $2 million in the process, Mrs. Sterling added, by staging the accident and claiming the insurance payout. Exactly, but I needed a cover story. The insurance company would have dug deep if they thought it was suspicious. So I made sure Zoya stayed broke, stayed desperate, and stayed loyal. A grieving widow paying off her dead husband's debts? That's the perfect smokescreen. He took a sip of wine. She never questioned it. Not once. She's too good, Mrs. Sterling sneered. Too naive. I almost pity her. Don't, Kasim repeated. She's serving her purpose. In a few more months, I'll be gone. New name, new city, new life. Diane and I are moving to California. Zoya will never find me. My chest felt like it was caving in. Cyrus glanced at me. You okay? I nodded, even though I wasn't. The conversation shifted. What about the kid? Mr. Sterling asked. Kasim's face hardened. What about her? Amira, your daughter. Don't you ever think about her? There was a long silence. Then Kasim laughed. It was cold, empty. She's not my problem anymore. Zoya can raise her. I did my part by giving her a name. That's more than most deadbeat dads do. Mrs. Sterling nodded approvingly. You're better off without that baggage. I wanted to vomit. Amira wasn't baggage. She was a 5-year-old child who drew pictures of her father and asked when he was coming back from heaven. And he called her baggage. Cyrus adjusted the microphone slightly, capturing every syllable. Then Mrs. Sterling said something that made everything worse. You know, we really should increase the payment next month. For $100 a week. She'll pay it. She thinks it's her duty to God. Kasim grinned. Do it. If she complains, just tell her Pop needs surgery or something. She'll find the money. She always does, Mrs. Sterling said. Stupid, faithful little thing. They all laughed. I closed my eyes and focused on breathing. A police cruiser rolled past us again, slower this time. Cyrus tensed. We need to move. If they run our plates. Just a minute, I said. I wanted to hear more. I needed to hear more. Kasim stood up and walked to the edge of the patio, phone in hand. He dialed a number. Hey, babe. Yeah, I'll be home in an hour. Just having dinner with my folks. His folks. Not as accomplices. Not as co-conspirators. His folks. Love you too, he said, and hung up. Diane, his new wife. The woman who had no idea she was married to a ghost. Mrs. Sterling looked at him. Does she suspect anything? Not a thing. She thinks I'm a contractor who inherited money from a distant uncle. Clean history. Clean slate. Perfect. I felt my hands shaking again. This wasn't just fraud. This was a complete erasure of my existence. In Kasim's new life, I didn't exist. Amira didn't exist. We were just inconvenient footnotes he'd buried along with his fake grave. Then I heard Mrs. Sterling's voice again, and this time it was the final nail. We should increase the debt to $400 next month. She'll pay it. She thinks it's for God. Cyrus turned off the recorder. We have everything we need, he said quietly. Let's go. I nodded. We drove in silence for a long time. When we finally stopped at a gas station halfway back to Connecticut, I got out of the car and leaned against the hood, staring at the night sky. Cyrus came over and handed me a bottle of water. You okay? I didn't answer. Zoya, I'm fine. You're not. I turned to look at him. He called our daughter baggage, Cyrus. He said she wasn't his problem. He's living in a mansion with a new wife while I'm feeding Amira canned soup. And he doesn't care. He's never cared. Cyrus put a hand on my shoulder. Then we make him care. We take everything he built and we burn it to the ground. I looked at him. Ow! We go to the FBI. We hand over the recordings, the photos, the bank records, the fake urn, all of it. This isn't just fraud, Zoya. This is federal. Wire fraud, insurance fraud, identity theft. He's looking at 15, maybe 20 years. And his parents? Conspiracy, accessory. They're going down too. I felt something shift inside me. Something cold and hard and final. The woman who walked into that cemetery and cried over Sam was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who wasn't afraid anymore. Let's do it, I said. The next morning, Cyrus and I drove to Maryland. We had one last piece of the puzzle to find. The man who'd signed Kasim's fake death certificate. His name was Vincent Grayson. According to the documents we'd found, he was listed as the safety compliance officer for Frontier Processing, the shell company that supposedly employed Kasim in North Dakota. Cyrus had tracked him down to a small town outside Baltimore. We found him at a park, sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons. He was in his 50s, balding, with the kind of face that looked like it had seen too many bad decisions. I walked up to him slowly. Cyrus stayed a few steps behind, recording everything on his phone. Mr. Grayson? He looked up, startled. Yeah. My name is Zoya Hale. You signed my husband's death certificate 5 years ago. His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo of the sand-filled urn. This is what you sent me. Industrial sand and fishing weights. You told me it was my husband's ashes. He stood up, backing away. Lady, I don't know who you are, but you need to leave me alone. Sit down, Mr. Grayson. Something in my voice made him stop. I pulled out a second phone and played the audio recording from the New Jersey patio. Kasim's voice filled the air. Fake death certificate, fake cremation, fake everything. Grayson's face crumbled. I didn't have a choice, he said weakly. Sit down. He sat. I sat across from him, my hands folded calmly on my lap. You're going to tell me everything, and then you're going to help me make this right. He looked at Cyrus, then back at me. If I talk, they'll kill me. If you don't talk, I'll make sure you spend the next decade in a federal prison. Your choice. He was silent for a long time. Then he started talking. Kasim owed money, a lot of money, to some very bad people in North Dakota. Gambling debts. He was in deep, 60, maybe 70,000. They were going to kill him. So he faked his death. Grayson nodded. He came to me with a plan. There was another worker at the plant, a guy named Torres. Torres got hurt in a real accident, badly burned, unrecognizable. Kasim paid me $50,000 to swap the identities. Torres became Kasim. Kasim became a ghost. My stomach turned. So someone else died, and you let Kasim walk away. Torres didn't have any family. No one to claim him. It was supposed to be clean. Clean, I said, my voice sharp. You erased a man's existence and sent his widow's sand in a jar. That's clean to you? Grayson looked down at his hands. I'm not proud of it. Good, because you're going to fix it. He looked up. What? I leaned forward. You're going to come with me to the FBI. You're going to tell them everything. And you're going to testify against Kasim and his parents. I can't. You can. And you will. Most people will ignore the red flags in their own lives until it's too late. If you're not subscribed, you're essentially saying you're okay with being the last person to know the truth. Don't let that be your legacy. Hit subscribe. Grayson shook his head. They'll come after me. Then we'll put you in witness protection. But you're not walking away from this. His phone rang. He pulled out of his pocket. The screen lit up. Incoming call, V. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling. He looked at me, terrified. Answer it, I said. What? Answer it. And tell them everything is fine. He stared at me. Do it. Now. With shaking hands, he answered the call and put on speaker. Vincent. Mrs. Sterling's voice was sharp. We need a status update. Have you heard from anyone? Any investigators asking questions? Grayson looked at me. I nodded. No one's contacted me. Everything's quiet. Good. Keep it that way. If anyone starts digging, you call us immediately. Understood. Understood. And Vincent, don't do anything stupid. You know what happens to people who talk. The line went dead. Grayson's hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. I stood up. Get in the car. What? You just heard her threaten you. That's obstruction. Witness intimidation. You're coming with me to the FBI. Right now. He didn't move. Cyrus stepped forward. You can come willingly, or I can call the police and have you arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud. Either way, you're talking. Grayson looked between us. Then he stood up. Fine. I'll talk. But you better keep me alive. We will, I said. As long as you tell the truth. We walked to the car. As I opened the door, Grayson looked at me. Why are you doing this? Most people would have just walked away. I met his eyes. Because my daughter deserves to know her father wasn't a hero. And because I'm done being a ghost in my own life. I got in the car. Cyrus drove. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt like I was finally in control. 2 weeks later, I sat in a windowless room in the FBI field office in Newark, New Jersey, watching 4 computer screens simultaneously. Special Agent Morales sat next to me, her face calm and focused. She'd been assigned to the case the day Cyrus and I walked in with Grayson and 3 banker's boxes full of evidence. She'd listened to the recordings, reviewed the photos, examined the fake death certificate and the sand-filled urn. And then she'd looked at me and said, "We're going to bury them." Now it was happening. On screen 1, a live feed from a surveillance van parked outside the Bridgeport house where the Sterlings pretended to be poor. On screen 2, a drone feed hovering above the Cherry Hill estate where they actually lived. On screen 3, body camera footage from the lead agent preparing to breach the Bridgeport door. On screen 4, a tactical map showing the positions of every agent involved in the operation. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Agent Morales spoke into her headset. All units stand by. We move in 3, 2, 1. Execute. Screen 1 exploded with movement. 6 agents in tactical vests stormed up the steps of the Bridgeport house. The lead agent pounded on the door. FBI, open the door. There was a pause, then the sound of shuffling feet. The door cracked open. Mrs. Sterling's face appeared, her expression shifting from confusion to indignation in half a second. What is this? What do you want? We have a warrant for your arrest. Step outside with your hands visible. Arrest? For what? I'm an old woman. I haven't done anything. The agent held up the warrant. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. Step outside. Now. Mrs. Sterling's face twisted with rage. This is harassment. I'm a widow. My son died. You can't. Step outside, ma'am, or we will enter by force. She didn't move. The agent nodded to his team. They pushed the door open and entered. Mrs. Sterling screamed, "You're monsters. You're terrorizing a grieving mother." And then she saw me. I was standing at the bottom of the steps, flanked by two agents. Her face went white. "You," she hissed. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her. Agent Morales stepped forward. "Mrs. Vivian Sterling, you're under arrest." They cuffed her right there on the porch. She thrashed and screamed the entire time. "This is a mistake. She gave that money freely. She wanted to help us. Tell them, Zoya, tell them." I stayed silent. Mr. Sterling was brought out next, his face blank with shock. He didn't fight. He just stared at the ground as they read him his rights. Then the agents went inside to search the house. 11 minutes later, one of them came back out holding a crowbar and a brick. "Agent Morales, you're going to want to see this." On screen one, I watched as they tore open a section of the wall in the Sterling's bedroom. Inside, stuffed into the insulation, were stacks of cash. Bundled, organized, labeled. They pulled out stack after stack, laying them on the floor. When they finished counting, the total came to $103,400. Agent Morales looked at me. "That's your money." I nodded. Every cent I gave them for 5 years. They never spent it. They just hoarded it while I starved. She made a note on her tablet. "This is now evidence. But once the case is closed, it's yours." Screen 2 lit up. The New Jersey raid was underway. 6 agents surrounded the Cherry Hill house. 2 went to the front door. 2 covered the back. 2 stayed at the garage. The lead agent knocked. The door opened. A woman appeared. Mid-30s. Blonde. Confused. "Diane, Kasim's new wife. Can I help you?" "We're looking for Kasim Sterling. Is he home?" Her face shifted. "Sterling? His last name is Hale." "No, ma'am. His legal name is Kasim Sterling. He's wanted for federal fraud." "Is he here?" She looked like she'd been slapped. I don't understand." From inside the house, I heard Kasim's voice. "Babe, who is it?" Then he appeared in the doorway and froze. For a split second, his eyes met the camera. He knew exactly what was happening. He bolted. He turned and sprinted toward the back of the house. The agents moved instantly. "Suspect is running. Cover the exits." On screen 2, I watched Kasim tear through his kitchen, shoving chairs out of the way, heading for the back door. He threw it open and ran straight into Vincent Grayson. Grayson was standing there in a witness protection vest, flanked by 2 agents holding a pair of handcuffs. Kasim skidded to a stop, his face going pale. "Hello, Kasim," Grayson said quietly. Kasim tried to run the other direction. An agent tackled him to the ground. They cuffed him face down on his own lawn. I watched it all on the screen, my hands trembling. Agent Morales glanced at me. "You okay?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. On screen 2, they hauled Kasim to his feet. He was shouting, his face red with rage. "This is illegal. You can't do this. I have rights." The agent read him his Miranda rights in a calm, flat voice. Then they walked him toward the front of the house. Diane was standing on the porch, crying, her hands over her mouth. "Who are you?" she screamed at Kasim. "Who the hell are you?" He didn't answer. They put him in the back of a black SUV, the same kind of SUV he'd been driving for years while I walked 3 miles to work. And then they brought him to the field office. An hour later, I was standing in an interrogation room, separated from Kasim by a pane of reinforced glass. He was sitting at a metal table, still cuffed, his head down. Agent Morales stood next to me. "You don't have to do this." "I need to." She nodded and opened the door. I walked in. Kasim looked up. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he broke. Zoya, please, let me explain. I didn't sit down. I just stood there, looking at him. I did it for you, he said, his voice desperate. For us. I was in so much debt, I didn't know what else to do. If I'd stayed, they would have killed me. And then where would you and Amira be? I still didn't speak. I sent money to my parents. I made sure you were taken care of. You took $300 from me every single week while I fed our daughterkin soup. He flinched. You let me walk 3 miles to work in the snow because I couldn't afford a bus pass. You let me believe you were dead. You let me mourn you. I didn't have a choice. You had a million choices. You chose this. He looked down at his hands. Agent Morales stepped forward and placed something on the table. My budget notebook. The one where I tracked every single dollar for 5 years. Every cent is in there, I said, my voice cold. Every payment, every sacrifice, every time I chose between paying you and feeding my child. Kasim stared at the notebook. I want it all back, I said. Every cent, every moment, every tear. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. I'm sorry. I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. 3 months later, the trial began. The federal courthouse in Newark was a massive stone building with marble floors and high ceilings that made every footstep echo. It was the kind of place designed to remind you that justice was bigger than any one person. I sat in the front row of the gallery, Cyrus beside me, watching as the prosecution laid out the case piece by piece. The lead prosecutor was a woman named Helena Vance. She was sharp, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. She opened with Exhibit A, the urn. They brought it into the courtroom on a small card, sealed in a clear evidence bag. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Vance said, her voice calm and clear, this is what the defendant sent to his widow after faking his own death. Inside, you will not find human remains. You will find industrial sand and fishing weights purchased at a hardware store for less than $20. She let that sit for a moment. For 5 years, Zoya Hale prayed over this urn. She believed it contained the ashes of the man she loved. It is not. It contains a lie. The jury stared at the urn. Vance continued. The defendant, Kasim Sterling, orchestrated an elaborate fraud scheme. He faked his death to escape gambling debts and to defraud an insurance company of $2 million. He enlisted his parents, Vivian and Roland Sterling, to extract an additional $78,000 from his widow under the guise of a debt that never existed. She pulled up a photo on the screen, a side-by-side comparison of the Bridgeport house and the Cherry Hill estate. While Ms. Hale lived in poverty, the Sterlings lived in luxury. While she walked miles to work, they drove new cars. While she fed her daughter canned soup, they ate prime rib and drank expensive wine. The jury looked horrified. Over the next 2 weeks, the prosecution brought witness after witness. Cyrus testified about the digital trail. Grayson testified about the faked death certificate. Mr. Henderson testified about the midnight visits. The grocery store owner testified about the expensive receipts. And then, the bombshell, Diane took the stand. Kasim's new wife. She looked small and broken, her hands twisting a tissue in her lap. Vance approached her gently. Mrs. Hale, or should I say, Mrs. Sterling, can you tell the court how you met the defendant? Diane's voice was shaky. He told me his name was Kasim Hale. He said he was a contractor. He said he'd inherited money from a distant uncle and wanted to invest it in a new life. Did he ever mention Zoya Hale? No, never. Did he ever mention a daughter named Amira? Diane shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, he told me he'd never been married. He said I was his first real love. Vance pulled up a bank statement on the screen. During your marriage, did you notice any unusual financial activity? Yes. About 6 months in, I found out he'd taken out a loan in my name. $50,000. Without telling me. The courtroom gasped. He stole from you too. Diane nodded. When I confronted him, he said it was a mistake, that he'd fix it, but he never did. And now I'm buried in debt I didn't even know existed. Vance thanked her and sat down. The defense tried to fight back. Kasim's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, stood up and tried to argue that Zoya had given the money freely. Your Honor, there was no written contract, no signed agreement. Ms. Hale chose to make these payments out of a sense of familial duty. The Sterlings never forced her to do anything. I felt my blood boil, but Vance was ready. She stood up, holding a stack of papers. If the payments were voluntary, why did the defendants hide over $100,000 in cash inside the walls of their house? Why did they live a double life? Why did they lie about their financial situation? The lawyer stammered. That's circumstantial. And why? Vance continued. Did Mrs. Vivian Sterling tell her son, on a recorded conversation, that they should increase the debt to $400 because she'll pay it? She thinks it's for God. She played the audio. Mrs. Sterling's voice filled the courtroom. She'll pay it. She thinks it's for God. The jury's faces hardened. The defense had no response. You've seen the justice Zoya fought for, but are you brave enough to support the truth in your own feed? If you're still not subscribed, you're basically voting for the liars to win. Prove you're on the right side. Subscribe now. Then it was time for sentencing. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a face that looked like it had seen every kind of evil humanity could offer. She looked at Kasim, then at his parents, then at me. I have presided over many fraud cases in my career, she said, her voice measured and heavy. But I have never seen a betrayal of this magnitude. You did not just steal money. You stole years. You stole hope. You weaponized love and faith to exploit a woman who trusted you. She turned to Kasim. You were a coward. You abandoned your wife and child, faked your own death, and built a new life on the suffering of the people who loved you most. You deserve no mercy. She paused. Kasim Sterling, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 10. All assets, including the Cherry Hill property and the offshore accounts, are to be forfeited and returned to Ms. Hale. Kasim's face crumbled. The judge turned to his parents. Vivian and Roland Sterling, you enabled this fraud. You participated willingly and gleefully. You're sentenced to 5 years each with asset forfeiture. The Bridgeport property and all cash recovered will be returned to Ms. Hale. Mrs. Sterling started screaming. This is wrong. She gave that money freely. Tell them, Zoya, tell them. The judge banged her gavel. Silence. But Mrs. Sterling kept screaming. I stood up. The courtroom went quiet. The judge looked at me. Ms. Hale, do you have something to say? I walked to the front of the room. My legs felt steady. My voice felt strong. I looked at Kasim, at his parents, at the lawyer who'd tried to paint me as a fool. I didn't give money, I said. I gave my life. I gave my daughter's childhood. I gave 5 years of hope and faith and love. And today, I'm taking it all back. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I don't want their apologies. I don't want their excuses. I want justice. And I want every woman who's been exploited like this to know that liars don't win. Not forever. The judge nodded. Then justice is what you'll have. She banged the gavel one final time. Court is adjourned. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of my new home in Stamford, Connecticut. It was a small house, nothing extravagant, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms, a backyard with a swing set, a kitchen with windows that let in so much light it felt like the sun lived there. Amira ran past me, laughing, chasing a butterfly across the lawn. I watched her, my heart full. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't counting pennies. I wasn't walking miles in the cold. I wasn't sacrificing my daughter's future for a ghost. The settlement from the trial had been substantial. The offshore accounts, the Cherry Hill property, the cash from the walls, all of it returned to me, plus damages. I'd used part of it to buy this house. The rest I'd set aside, because I had a plan. The week before, I'd met with a lawyer and a financial advisor. I want to start a foundation, I'd told them, for women in financial abuse situations. Women who are being exploited by family, by partners, by people who use their faith and love as weapons. The lawyer had smiled. That's a beautiful idea. It's not just an idea. It's a promise. We named it the Hollow Earn Foundation. A reminder that sometimes the things we're told to honor are nothing but sand and lies, and that it's okay to break open the urn and demand the truth. One afternoon, I took Amira back to the cemetery where Kasim's fake grave had been. The niche was empty now. The urn had been removed as evidence and never returned. I stood in front of the blank space, holding Amira's hand. "Mama, why are we here?" "To say goodbye, baby. To Daddy." I knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "Your daddy wasn't the man I thought he was. But that doesn't mean you're any less loved. You have me. You have your Uncle Cyrus. And you have a whole future ahead of you that no one could take away." She nodded, her little face serious. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, baby. We can go home." As we walked back to the car, I looked over my shoulder one last time. The grave was empty, and so was the weight I'd been carrying. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. Cyrus called. "Hey, just checking in. How are you doing?" "I'm good. Really good." "You sound different." "I feel different." There was a pause. "I'm proud of you, Zoya. You know that, right?" "I know. What you did, what you built, it's going to help a lot of people." "I hope so." We talked for a while longer, and then I hung up. I looked out at the horizon, where the sky was turning pink and gold. For 5 years, I'd lived in the dark. I'd believed the lies. I'd sacrificed everything for people who saw me as nothing more than a paycheck. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was someone new, someone who'd walked through fire and came out stronger. Someone who knew that the truth, no matter how painful, was always worth fighting for. I pulled out my phone and opened the Foundation's website. We'd launched it 2 weeks ago. Already, we'd received over 300 messages from women asking for help. Women who were trapped, exploited, told they were doing the right thing while being bled dry. I was going to help every single one of them because I knew what it felt like to be used, and I knew what it felt like to break free. This is the end of Zoya's journey, but yours is just beginning. If you've made it this far and haven't subscribed, you're missing out on the only content that actually matters. Don't be the one left behind when the next truth drops. Subscribe now. Amira came outside, holding a drawing she'd made at school. "Mama, look, I drew our new house." I looked at the picture. It was a crooked little house with a big yellow sun and 2 stick figures holding hands. "It's beautiful, baby. Are we going to live here forever?" "As long as you want." She smiled and ran back inside. I sat there for a long time, watching the sun dip below the trees. They thought I was the fool, the grieving widow who'd believe anything, the loyal wife who'd pay forever. But in the end, they were the ones who paid the price. Kasim was in a federal prison, his new life destroyed. His parents had lost everything, their house, their freedom, their reputation. And I was here, free, whole, building something that mattered. The question is, who in your life is holding a key you don't know about? Who's walking through your door at 2 in the morning while you're asleep? Who's taking your money, your trust, your faith, and turning it into their own private fortune? I didn't see it for 5 years. But when I finally did, I didn't just walk away. I burned it all down. And if you're watching this and something feels wrong in your life, if the numbers don't add up, if the excuses don't make sense, if the people you love are keeping you at arm's length while taking everything you have, trust that feeling. Dig deeper. Ask questions. And don't stop until you find the truth. Because the truth will set you free, even if it breaks your heart first. I stood up, finished my tea, and walked inside. Amira was waiting for me. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't have to choose between paying a debt and taking care of my daughter. Because the debt was gone, and my life was finally beautifully mine.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And guess what? The story doesn't end here. Click on the video right here on your screen to dive into another fascinating story. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Once again, thanks for being a part of this amazing community. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring stories that move you.